Greetings from Grassy Dread. Yeah, we're going out live to all the grasshoppers around the world, now the Grassy Dreadheads, wherever you are. Now we're coming to you basically 1 year from the first of many Grassy Dread shows and tours that were unfortunately cancelled during a very unfortunate series of events in an unlucky year that we call 2020. But if you have the luck of the Irish, then you know how to turn that around. So speaking of the Irish, that show, the first of many in a domino effect, it was cancelled unfortunately, for Grassy Dread, was due to take place on St. Paddy's Day. Alright, so I'm going to come to you and talk a little bit about St. Paddy's Day. And we're purposely doing this one day off because I didn't want to give, so much energy to the normal rigmarole and hullabaloo. These are Celtic terms in case you don't know, of the day that we call St. Patrick's Day. But this is the first of many that I hope to send out to our fans with love in our Grassy Dread family. It's called a Heartical article. Alright, this is Heartical article number 1, and it's about the Indigenous Irish. Check the name. It's got Irie all right in it. So, Irish culture and its diaspora has been, spread throughout the earth by various ways and means. Some positive and some negative. But like we said, coming off of 2020 and all of that nonsense, we want to flip a negative into a positive. Like all indigenous roots cultures, it's been subject to a lot of misappropriation. Today, the ancient ways and charm of the Irish have been commercialized, as you know, and bastardized by the culture of the parasitic conquerors. We call them, Babylon system. The most widely circulated myths that we have about Irish culture, available to the masses today, they all revolve around the figure, the one them called Saint Patrick, so-called saint, and the day, associated with his veneration and basically the celebration of this man's accomplishments. But who was this man that they call Saint Patrick, and what are the deeds attributed to him? Well, we're going to find out. The historical figure, as near as anyone can figure, upon whom the character, known as Saint Patrick is based, lived and died sometime between the years 373 and 460. The legends developed, about the man were developed over 1,000 years later. So, check it. And these legends tell us that the guy banished all snakes from Ireland into the sea. Well, there's only one small problem with this story, and that is that, like other island nations, Hawaii, Iceland, New Zealand, Ireland never has hosted any snakes. There's no archaeological record of them. There's no snakes on that island. Well, maybe the politicians count, but also this guy, Patrick, was not Irish. He was never recognized as a saint by the Vatican, and his name wasn't even Patrick. By now, I think most of you out there are, at least somewhat familiar or aware of the, the false image of Christopher Columbus and the very real atrocities to which he was accomplice. Like Peter Tosh say, you teach the children about Christopher Columbus, and you say he was a very great man. But, we know differently. And basically, it turns out that it's a similar situation with this so-called Saint Patrick, or Magonus Sacatus, as he was originally called, when he was called upon by Rome to do their bidding. The Pope at that time did not give him, did not grant him sainthood or nothing like that. But he did add to his name the title of Patricus, a Latin designation for basically the Roman ruling class, right? You got Patricus, and then you have plebeian, which is the working class, And now a certain group of plebeian was set under this man, who took upon the title Patricus, and they were sent out to basically tame, the Paganos, which is, the Roman name for people of the land. And so they went out to bring basically Pope Celestine. He was hoping that Patricus and his men would bring the Catholic faith to the Emerald Isle. Bringing the Catholic faith, in this instance meant the same that it did everywhere where the Jesuit missionaries, or we should say mercenaries, went, where they were sent throughout the world. It meant genocide and subjugation of remnant indigenous populations to slavery. From the Confession of St. Patrick, which is a book written in a first-person account, although St. Paddy himself was probably more of a patsy, or a scapegoat for the Roman Catholic Empire's unethical expansionist policies, right? So that would put all our anger and our hatred towards one figure, and we don't ever figure it out that the Babylon system will run the world and run us into the ground. But basically, in this book, The Confessions of St. Patrick, we hear him describe his feats in legendary and heroic terms. But his prayers were not pious. They were, in fact, poison. He boasts of praying for the death of an old Irishman who opposed him. His teaching was thinly veiled treachery, targeting women and the poor. A suspicious sounding account of the baptism of two pagan princesses is likely describing a murderous drowning. The saint, so-called, meets these two young tribal daughters of a chief by a body of water on their lands, the tribal lands. He tells the girls about Jesus. And, well, there's no problem with Jesus, right? But it's the way where people use it, people with bad mind and bad intentions. So he tells these two beautiful pagan princesses about Jesus, and when they say, we'd like to see Jesus, being young and innocent as they are, Patrick pulls a little trick and tells them that the only way to see Jesus is through a water ritual that symbolizes death and rebirth, what we call a baptism or a baptism. Because it's a real thing. If you do it right, you can baptize your soul and your spirit, clean up the bad mind. But this man is a faker and a liar coming from, Babylon. And he said, well, the only way you can see Jesus is if you go through this ritual that symbolizes death and rebirth, So being very familiar with your symbolic rites and such, as they were pagan princesses, the sisters agreed to symbolically die. Patrick says that they literally died after he put the Eucharist in their mouth. Probably gagged them and drowned them too. If his conversions were really, just euphemisms for villainous cons, and his so-called miracles were militaristic maneuvers, basically, then the one for, which is most famous, that of banishing all the snakes, supposedly, the non-existent snakes, from off of the island and into the sea, is really more likely just a code for killing and driving off all the Druids. Now, what's a Druid? You say, the Druids, were the pagan priests of the Indigenous IRIEsh, the tribal spirituality of the man. And, the story says that, or one story in the Confessions of St. Patrick, he says that he conducted like a competition where he threw a Bible and a Druid book into the water to see which would float and which would just sink. Now there's just one problem with this story here, and that is that, Druid means one who knows the tree. Dru is tree or wood, and wid like a wits about you, is to know. So the Druids were an earth-centric priest class, centered around wisdom received firsthand, directly from the trees themselves, especially the sacred oak, which was, sacred to my ancestry, Irish ancestry. But they did not need to cut down trees. They didn't go around, making, trees into lumber and lumber into paper to write things down in books, because there was no need, since as with most indigenous belief systems, their knowledge and their traditions were passed down orally. Is what we call the oral tradition, right? Verbally, in stories and song, like we do today, or we try to keep it alive. But all of humanity's roots cultures, by no means relied completely or solely upon this oral tradition. Many had written language, which they used for certain special occasions, mostly. But however, the majority of members of any truly tribal nation did not utilize written language in their day-to-day life. What the indigenous in all corners of the earth during the old world time period did rely upon was, in the day-to-day living, was a type of land-based law, a living language that modern scientists, called DNA. And it was written, in their very bodies and hearts to know what is correct conduct for experiencing, the maximum amount of balance and harmony with oneself and one's neighbor, and also the environment. So this is why genocidal regimes employ a combination of both subtle and brutal epigenetic tactics that are designed to target the genes of natural nations and bring once free people down to their knees. The recent and recent unlucky history, we could say, of Irish peoples everywhere has been converted to an impoverished state that enriches the emperor of Rome, a state-run Babylon system, which Rasta and reggae culture chants down, with such feeling. The Irish gene pool shows the same story, basically, that it used to express itself in more earth tones, shall we say, in the skin, and curlier, darker locks of hair. Surviving patches of melanin still hang on for dear life in the form of freckles upon the faces and the arms of the Irish people living today. After the fall of tribal society in Ireland, in subsequent phases of the church's dominance, many of those known as the Black Irish, you can Google that, were basically pushed out of the now gentrified island and into the Americas. That's where most of them they come. So, many were exiled in one way or another from the green island home of Ireland to faraway islands in the Caribbean. We find ample evidence of this Irish DNA and cultural practices in the look and linguistics of Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and other places throughout the Caribbean. But of course, there is this metaphysical side to the diaspora of Irish humans and culture. And it's on St. Patty's Day that all people everywhere, like I said, all the Grassy Dreadheads and all the grasshoppers out there listening, you can tap in and feel something of the Irish pride. But we really should do our best to honor this story, the real story of the Indigenous Irish, and to honor our international Irishness and all of our ancestors, all our ancestors, and the good spirits of the land, which is rooting for the human race. So let's, let's remember this moving forward, and forward ever, backward never, like they say. But take this knowledge that you know now about, the real St. Patrick, who wasn't even a saint, not even close. But take it and use it for use St. Patrick's Day next time around for more than just soliciting kisses or, getting drunk, tipsy, whatever, off of, some beer with green food dye. Nah, man. We got to do better than that, So, what Grassy Dread is trying to say with this message from the Heartical article number 1 is, please give the spirit of humanity inside of us a fighting Irish chance for positive change. Alright, one love.